honestly, when I look at the matchup between the two, right? Zombie has like a complete skill set, and so does Brian Ortega. But where Brian Ortega struggled with Max Holloway was when he was forced to stand for an extended period of time. And I think that's the same type of situation he's going to find himself in with the Zombie. He's got to get this fight to the ground. And if not for keeping him there extended periods of time, he has to be able to mix it up to make the Korean Zombie not feel so comfortable on the feet, because that dude's a handful too. So ultimately, it's I know Brian Ortega knocked out Frankie Edgar, and sometimes you fall in love with the hands, but for him, he needs to get this fight to the floor, because if the Zombie can stay standing, he's very difficult.
Yeah, we just found out the last couple of days, obviously, that Henner can't make it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from a fighter's point of view, like, how much difference can that make? I mean, I kind of like what Henner said, where he's like, dude, jiu-jitsu, you got.
That was the most. I was on the plane with Brian Ortega over, and we were talking, and he was talking about his training camp and how well it went, and how Henner had his positive test weeks ago, right? But he's been kind of alternating positive and negative. And when you get to Vegas, if you're positive, you can't travel. It is what it is. But if there was one coach, and this is a mindset of Brian Ortega, right? If there's one coach that he had to go without, why? If it's the jiu-jitsu guy, he feels pretty confident. Because as we know, Brian Ortega is as talented a grappler as we have in the entire UFC. So, tough for a team, but it's like me not having a wrestling coach going into a fight. Right. So, it's best of the worst case scenario.
Does it change though? Like, because I get the feeling they're kind of like a mentor relationship too, right? I mean, does that change anything?
Well, I mean, I just think that at this point, right, when you fought for a world championship, you know how to go fight, right? And what's normal? What's normal today, right? So to think that Brian Ortega is going into this fight and things don't feel normal, well, he's fighting in Abu Dhabi on Fight Island. There's a place called Fight Island that Brian Ortega is fighting the Korean Zombie, right? So what's normal in 2020? So this is kind of par for the course for all the fighters that are fighting on these cards. If something gets dealt your way, whatever. It's the way the world works today.
Really, as a storyteller, which is what I consider myself to be, the whole thing about the delays in which has come before us, the kind of sideshows that have been around that, and then this massive change from Ortega. I'm fascinated to see how he wants to be a completely different version of a guy who was the best, like one of the best guys in the division, but it's all change. Like, what does that mean? What are you going to look like? And Zombie's been working more closely with like Eddie Char, and like I think these guys could be quite different in the way that they come into this, which is, as a fan, fascinating. I mean, I love watching both of them, but could it be better? Great.
It's an amazing matchup, and I think for me the biggest thing with these two guys is the X factors. I love a fight where we already know what we're going to get from these guys to a degree, just because of the styles that we have come to know them by over the years. Zombie coming forward, Ortega with just that ridiculous jiu-jitsu, so much power in his hands. But they both have been inactive to varying degrees, and especially Brian Ortega. I mean, when a guy's out that long, you have no idea what tool set he's been able to create in the meantime. Now, I know he's been dealing with injuries and stuff, but he comes from a great camp. I actually sat next to his striking coach on the way over here, so I had a lot of time to chat. And I think we're going to see an even improved Brian Ortega on the feet. And Zombie, obviously, we know he has a danger factor anywhere this fight goes. I do think in terms of just stylistic matchup, he's dangerous everywhere. But I think he's going to try to keep it on the feet, and I just can't wait to see it. Like, I like Brian Ortega on so many levels, and I'm excited to see him back. I'm kind of a jiu-jitsu nerd, so I like that type of fight. And there are so few fighters that when they jump guard, I'm like, yes, this is getting exciting. He just jumped, who does that, right? Like in MMA, we tend to, someone does that, we're like, oh, what a pussy, Not when Brian Ortega does it. He's about to do something crazy cool. So I'm pumped for that fight.
Right. I mean, for me, in my role, obviously, it's more of the storyline. I think you can't deny that we all know this is a fight that we've been looking forward to. Their two styles or something that, we love that kind of clash inside the octagon. But for me, the storyline is so interesting. And being at that fight in Las Vegas, when it all kind of went down and the drama just was heightened, I think it adds something. You know, I don't think that they needed any drama to sell this fight, but I think because it's there is certainly another level of interest. You have to wonder how that's going to affect people. I mean, Korean Zombie even made some comments about, you know, handling his emotions, and I was saying negative things, and that wasn't really me. So you can tell, I mean, it is affecting them in one way or another. So you kind of wait and see, like, oh, how do they look when they get into the octagon? You know, what's their walkout like? Do they seem like emotions getting to them? So I think it just kind of adds another layer to a fight that we are already so excited about.
Well, ultimately it's down to Brian Ortega to decide where he wants the fight to take place. What we know of Korean Zombie from back in the day, you go back to the Leonard Garcia fight in WEC, and that was an absolute war. But when he made his UFC debut, won by Twister. So we got two sides of the same coin of Korean Zombie. He can trade punches and get wild, but he can also submit you with a highly technical submission. The streak that he went on after that, knocking out Mark Hominick in 6 seconds, getting in there against Aldo, and giving a good account of himself, I think it set him up for a good time away to reflect on where he's at and you know, who he was as a fighter while the division was developing around him. When he returned to the UFC, he was a different individual. And what I like about the Korean Zombie, much like Justin Gaethje and the evolution that we've seen in him recently, he doesn't need to take punches. He's not there to be hit anymore. You watch the Moicano fight, and he stands waiting. And it's one of the most beautiful knockouts I've ever seen, purely because he never takes his eyes off Moicano's chin. He waits for the shot to come. As the punch comes out, he slips, and he watches his chin as he comes over and hits him with that laser-focused right hand. The mentality of not caring about your own well-being and, you know, the damage you take to your face puts you in a very strong position to slip your head off the center line and punish people for missing. We've seen that with Justin Gaethje recently. Korean Zombie turned that corner when he came out of the military and rejoined the UFC. So it's all about him standing his ground and waiting for Ortega to come to him. And what I like about Ortega as well, coming off his first loss, he will have definitely have learned from that. We know he's got good boxing skills. We know he's got great ground skills as well. Zombie's a bit of an enigma on the ground. We don't know much about him on the ground, so I wouldn't mind seeing it hit the mat for a scramble. But in the striking ranges, it's Ortega drifting in and out of range and peppering him with boxing, while Zombie waits to knock him out with that one clean punch. They're very, very different strikers, very, very different approach to the game, but both highly skilled and highly technical. And I always get excited to see an undefeated fighter pick up a first loss and see what they change about their game, because we always see jumps in their game, evolutions, and Brian Ortega is the kind of guy that doesn't need to pick up second loss like Justin Gaethje did. A little bit hard-headed of him to go back into the next fight with the same style. I'm excited to see the developments in his game, and Korean Zombie's a legend. You know, he was a legend before he even signed his UFC contract because of that Leonard Garcia fight. So it'll be an honor to call that one.